In this video, we're going to talk about how we would build a commercial cleaning company from 0 to 7 figures. My name is Cameron and this is Ron, and we have built CT Cleaners up to 7 figures over the last few years, which is a 100% commercial cleaning company. And this is exactly what we would do if everything was wiped clean tomorrow.
We've been through the hard times. We did all the bids, we did the cleaning, we did everything at first, and our challenge was to build the systems so that we weren't involved with a company on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour operation. And we're going to go through the process of how you get there to make it a lifestyle business versus a grind. And that is the most difficult part. I remember when we hired our first employee, it was very difficult. And let me tell you, we messed up. We made mistakes. I don't know how many times we went through that first employee, but it was more than one or two until we could get it right. Now that first employee is still with us, still cleaning the same original contract, and honestly, life-changing situation.
Yep, so this is basically our story and how we did it. It's how we built real teams and have made real mistakes and got to where we've gotten to with, like you said, making this business kind of into a quote-unquote lifestyle business or something that is sellable.
Yeah, our goal from the beginning was to create an income, but also to make it so that somebody can come in and make the process, as Cam said, sellable. And sellable, effectively, once you get into the process of moving on from owning a company to buying the company, is the owner has to be not a full-time employee, meaning that they have managers, they have everything in place that someone else can work the business, so you can walk away for a week or 2 weeks or a month completely and maybe handle a phone call or two, but not do anything. That is the long-term objective.
Yep, now we buy businesses that have been built wrong, and then we place these systems in place, and that is how we continue to grow as well.
The wrong way is, quite frankly, what most businesses do. They build everything, they don't have systems in place, so it's dependent on them, and that is why the owners are always struggling. Like, what do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? You need to learn to be proactive, get the system set up so that the back end is easier.
And to be fair, this is about how every business starts. I think in the beginning, every phase of moving through the business, there's a learning curve and a part that's a struggle as you progress through there. I remember when we hired our first cleaner, and the process of doing that and realizing that there was a quality drop in the quality of cleaning that was happening, which, by the way, is correctable by hiring the right people, but learning how to hire the right people and learning how to place the right people in that atmosphere is itself a learning curve that you have to go through, especially if you're, sub $10,000 a month, sub $20,000 a month, and you're still doing all the cleaning yourself.
Correct. When you start, you, the owner, you're gonna sell the job. You're gonna clean the job. You're gonna handle all the, the marketing, everything. After you're done cleaning, you have to go market, and then you gotta do payroll. And then you're like, how do I make payroll? And it feels good because you feel needed. You're doing great. You're being successful. But at a certain point, you will burn out unless you get the proper systems in place. Marketing is a big deal. I think we've gotten way past the need for massive marketing, although you can never do enough. But hiring is one of the keys to this business, and we will go through how you have to hire and what you need to do, because you are, more than anything, a people business if you want to succeed on a 7-figure scale. You can't be a single owner and do 7 figures. It's just, there isn't enough time in the day.
And I think Ron would probably agree with this, that there is a point in the business to where when you do everything yourself, everything's executed at a really high level. At least you think so, by you just doing it. But it caps the scalability, because obviously you cannot do the cleaning, you cannot do the marketing, you cannot do the payroll, you cannot do everything every single day and build a really big business. You need other people that can handle these things for you to be able to scale. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck there forever, and you're what I would call self-employed, not a true business owner, or even really a business operator at that point. You truly are self-employed, cleaning, doing stuff every night.
It's a great point Cam makes, and what you need to do is, if you are working 60 hours a week as the owner, you have a job. You've created a job for yourself, which is great, but the next transition is to get yourself out of doing that, and you have someone else doing the work for you, so that you can, as we say, instead of quit working in the business and start working at it. And you don't truly have a company until you start working at the business. If you're working in it, you have a job. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care if it's HVAC, photography, cleaning, whatever it is, you have a job unless you can step away, walk away for weeks at a time, and it still runs. It come back, it's doing more business than it was.
I think, what Ron's saying as well is that a business that needs you is a kind of a liability in the sense that if you step away, it falls apart. You don't have leverage until you can step away for a few weeks at a time and do that.
Yes. Designing the business from day one is what you want to do. You want to have it so that you can sell the business, but when you get to that point, as we found out, when you can sell the business, you're working at it. You don't need to sell it because you're not working that much. So then it becomes an option. Do I want to sell this company or don't I? I can walk away. I can go to Hawaii for 2 weeks. I can do whatever I want to do because I have people in place that take care of my day-to-day operations. Yeah, there's always going to be a phone call here or there, but you can step away from that. We choose not to at this point, but the phone calls are one every 2 weeks. That's it.
The irony with building a business that is sellable too is that, people usually want to sell a business because they hate what they're doing. But once you build something that becomes sellable, it becomes sustainable, it becomes very easy to operate, essentially is what you need to do to make it sellable. You don't want to sell it anymore. You're like, why would I sell this check printing machine that I barely do any work for anymore, and that's the optionality, like Ron said, is the real power of having that option to sell even if you want to at that point.
Yes, the role, ownership, you have to have strategy, capital risk, management, you have to have people, execution, labor, and labor to me is probably one of the biggest parts, how to handle hiring good people, training good people. That is absolutely key because if you don't have good people working for you, it's hard. And I think one of the things we struggled with is I had to say, I don't want to be the best cleaner. We don't want to be the best cleaners anymore. We want to be the best, but we don't want to have to go in there and say, I'm doing so much of a better job that we can't replace us. You have to have people who care about the job, who show up for the job and are good. And when you go in, you say, oh, wow, this place is great. When you get to that point, that's when I think you've stepped over the edge of having a job and being an owner. And then once you have one, you'll get 2, 3, 4, 5, 30, 40, whatever your business takes. But the hard part is that first part, getting over the hump.
I think I'll dive into this for a little bit too, because it's so important in cleaning companies in particular, is how to recruit cleaners. And learning how to recruit cleaners itself is a very, very fundamental issue in the cleaning industry itself. Having a good cleaner will help you maintain contracts, which is one of the major levers of growing your company, is the maintenance of contracts. If you can maintain your contracts and stack contracts on top of it, that's one of the key aspects to really growing in this industry. And the key to maintaining is having really good cleaners that do really good jobs for your clients. And so how do we actually recruit those people is something I want to talk about for a second, because it's a fairly simple process, but not a lot of people know how to do it appropriately. And so what we do is that every single week we have a set schedule that we call open interviews. And you could do group interviews, but we do take them one-on-one, but we just take a line like open interview style. Once one interview is done, someone else comes in, we do another interview. Now you could group those together, do 5-10 people. But how do we get those people to the door, which I think is another thing that a lot of people struggle with. And today the best avenue that we've discovered that works is Indeed. And what we do with Indeed is that we run a nonstop $5 a day ad campaign in our area for a job. And that ad automatically sends an invite to everybody that applies with a link of where it's going to be, a time it's going to be, and what they need for the job and the restrictions of our job. We do try to eliminate some people based off, this is like, you're just not going to get this job if you don't have this thing. Like if you can't pass a background check, I'm sorry, it's not going to work out. We try to restrict people prior to getting to that point. And that process brings a lot of people in the door. And even when we don't need to necessarily hire, we have a backlog of cleaners that can work for us. And the reason that's also very important is that, I talk about the maintenance and the growing. Okay, when you're maintaining, you have your staff that's taking care of everything. What happens when you get another big contract and you don't have anyone to fulfill it? In the beginning, especially, it might be you that's stepping in and cleaning that contract. And until you have that backlog of cleaners that goes on top of that maintenance, you're still stepping in and cleaning that business. And if you're the one cleaning, you still are self-employed. You still do not own a business yet. You're still doing day-to-day stuff that requires you to be on the ground, physically cleaning at the locations that need to be cleaned. And so having that backlog of people, having that recruiting system in place is so fundamental and so important in the cleaning industry, because it is, without a doubt, the biggest bottleneck.
I couldn't agree more. What you find, and it's startling, especially in America today, that you will sign up 30 people to come to an interview. On average, it's going to be significantly less. 30 people promise they're coming, 12 are going to come, Out of those 12, there's going to be 5 that completely eliminate themselves for whatever reason. We require transportation. We ask them if they're physically fit. They all say they are. They may not be. Background check, is a big deal because you don't want somebody in there who has, a recent history of problems. Most people will tell you. But out of those 30, I believe the industry standard is about 3% that you're actually going to hire. And that is why you have to continually, we have our manager, she interviews every week. It's only an hour, but every single week there's interviews done. And you will find amazing people. But you have to go through the numbers. You can't interview 2 people and say, hey, I got one. There's zero doubt that you need to do that. But you need to have somebody, a manager that you've worked with for a while, that can handle that interviews. It's just you start them out at the beginning of the day. They go in for 1 hour of interviews, maybe an hour and a half at most, and get that done. And that helps the bottleneck, which we are, once you reach this point, you are no longer a cleaning company. You are a person company or a personnel. You're hiring people, not, the jobs will start to come because you have good people. That will create itself, but you have to have good people. Without good people, you have nothing. And going back to where we started with this, is when people want to buy your company, they're not buying it for the hustle. They're not buying it because they want a job. They want to work 40 hours. They're buying your company because it's independent from the owner. You have the systems in place that keep the owner from working 60 hours a week. If they want to work 5 hours, stay in touch, look at the financial statements, answer a few questions. That's what they want. That is how a company becomes valuable. That is how, when you get into it, you're receiving 2 to 5 to 7 to 8 to 10 times X on your money. And it's imperative that your goal has to be to get yourself out of the company in the end. But then once you're out of the company, do you really want to sell it? It's the option. We'll go back to what we said before. The option of selling the company is the end goal.
I don't know if Ron would agree with this, but probably is that I think when we figured out the recruiting process was one of the biggest pivotal changes we made in the business that allowed us to progress faster.
Unequivocally, we no longer were focused on cleaning. Our systems bring us jobs, the phone, we do bids all the time, but having employees in line, like we're adding 20 hours here, we're adding 40 hours here. We always have a list of amazing employees that we can call. Sure, we're not always hiring them right away after we interview them, but we have a list of them. We call them up. Yeah, we need a job. People need jobs right now. It's just the way it is, but absolutely, it is the number one problem in this industry, and the solution is very simple. So we've created systems for every part of this industry so that we can step back and not be involved. And one of the biggest systems you're going to want is a scheduling system. A scheduling system, all your employees can log on. They're not expensive. There's hundreds of them out there, and it produces the same results. You can check what your employees can do. One of the best things is our manager, every single night, the jobs are listed, and they know if somebody didn't show up to work. They know how long they're there. The systems for employees, it geo-tracks them. It does, it knows when they logged in. It knows when they logged out. It knows where they are. These systems are very basic nowadays. Even the least technologically skilled person can get on their smartphone now, log in. All they do is push a button, log out. It tells us where they're at, and it does a couple things. It then goes into, we know how many hours they worked that week. It also puts it into the payroll system, which you have a person handling the payroll system. And we have a great payroll system, and it tells them how many hours they work, what they're getting paid, when they're getting paid. It tells them everything. It eliminates phone calls because they can just log on to their system, see where they're going to work, how many hours they're going to work, what they're getting paid, how much the taxes are coming out. And it even tells them, at the end of the year, their W-2. It's all automated so that whole process of the employee, it's as simple as, okay, Joe, you are going to work for us. Here's a text message for logging in to tell us when you're at work. And here's an email. You sign up, you do your direct payroll, you do all your W-4, your 1099, or whatever form they're using, and it's all online. We don't have to do those things for them. And we have a staff that does handle a little bit of work for that at the end of the week to do payroll, but Everything is online, and it's a very important system.
And who helps us with those payroll things is actually we do have virtual assistants that help us with these. These are talented people with educations that live offshore that help us out, and they help us go in and collect the data for us. That running payroll is super easy. It's just a press of a button. And they also, once we get to this level, once you have the cleaners, you have the contracts coming in, once you have all these things, one of the things that, especially in our case, keeps you busy for Ron is answering the phone, just keeping up with the phone, dealing with the employees, and just answering potential clients coming in or leads. And that gets really busy. And so another system we have is one for the operational perspective is that we've hired an operations manager who is foot on the ground here, local, that handles the employees from day to day, which is a huge weight off our shoulders, I would say, is because there's just a lot of stuff that's going on, especially when you run a commercial cleaning company. We work 9 to 5, but then the cleaning starts from 5 to 11. And so if you're especially in the early phase, you're working to grow the business from 9 to 5, and then from 5 to 11, you're just putting out fires on taking care of your contracts. And so that turns into 14, 16-hour days, and those can be hard. But, back to the virtual assistants and how they help us, we do have a system for how they answer the phone, and they answer the phone for us from 8 to 8 every single day, and they put all the leads that come in that want to do walkthroughs. We have a Calendly set up, and they automatically book those walkthroughs through our VAs that call us. So our entire job really at this point is how do we make that phone ring, right? If we can make that phone ring, they put the bids on the calendar for us. At this point, we still do the bids, but the next level above and beyond this would definitely be hiring a salesperson to go out and do those bids for us. A lot of small bids we will do, over the phone nowadays. If it's so small, it's like, I know this price is going to be, here's what it is. But yeah.
And what we do with the bids, and it's important, is we have a minimum amount. We will not even go to a job under a certain amount. And that job has to be profitable. Every job has to be profitable or it's not there. And what we have for our manager is online. It's a spreadsheet, simple spreadsheet that our VAs have done for us. And it has every single job listed. And we have literally hundreds of contracts. And every job it says, here's where it's at, here's the address, here's the alarm code. You're gonna run into these problems eventually. You don't wanna have to be answering every single problem because if you got 50 different alarm codes out there, guess what? Someone's gonna mess up. But you need your manager to be able to handle those things. So all of that data for your manager is available to them at the flick of a finger. They're on their phone, they can see where they gotta go, they can see what hours they need to do, they can see the alarm code, the emergency backup. Everything has to be on there. Otherwise, as an owner, oh my God, you can be doing phone calls every night. At 5 o'clock, my phone pretty much goes off, and I work during the day. I do what I want, working on the business. Our manager handles every single thing at night. The fill-ins, every single thing is handled for us, and it's amazing.
Which I don't know about you, that stuff to me is unfortunately the headache part where it's like, oh man, this is frustrating to have to deal with. Because it doesn't feel like you're just solving what you have and you're maintaining the business, which is important, but also it can be a little frustrating where it's like, I just want to grow this business. I don't want to have to focus on this. I don't want to have to get called in and go help somebody clean or train somebody. Those are necessary at a certain level, but they become bottlenecks and holding you back when you're still doing them. And so hiring an operations manager actually promotes the growth of the company because it allows us to focus on the actual marketing. Back to the organization thing too, I think as our company got bigger and bigger, to me it became obvious that organization itself, which I don't think is either of our super strong suits, was one of the fundamental aspects of actually maintaining the business at the level it was. Because without organization, it's really difficult. I mean, simple things like just the keys and having a key room with all the keys labeled appropriately and securely and organized, and having appropriate sheets with all the information that we need on them. The appropriate software is interconnected, and all this information needs to be organized and accessible. Which another thing about that is that if you do want to sell this business, you cannot have all this information just in your head. It has to be on paper. It has to be trained to somebody else. It has to be accessible for somebody else to come in. Which is where something like an SOPs come into handy, so that if you do want to sell your business, you have all these SOPs, you have all these sheets, you have all this organized data and everything that you can hand to somebody else and they can take it, and it's super easy for them to take over the business. And that does increase the value of your company, because if someone has to come in and do a lot of work to make your business as smooth as it can be, it's just going to decrease the value.
And you want to talk about relaxing. I mean, we have that data sheet out there, and Cam will do a bid or I'll do a bid, and there's so many jobs now. Myself or Cam, we've never been there. So if I don't have that data sheet, I have no idea if what's going on at company ABC, I don't know. Quite frankly, I don't care. But you want to talk about relieving? I sit down at night and I don't know what, half of our jobs, I don't know what's going on, but I'm glad. That's a good thing. It took me a long time to get there because I like to be controlling. But once you get there, you want to make sure you have people in place that are doing the quality control. But when you have that, it's freedom. They allow the person to make choices. Okay, Joe's got to fill that job. Sue's going to fill that job. And it literally is life-changing. So I want to move forward into a little bit about the financial part. And really, to me, Cam and I are both numbers guys. That's one thing. That's one of our strong points, is the financials are everything. Obviously, you don't want to do this and not make money. And so with our financials in doing bids, it's very simple, but it's very complex. So you become better at it as you go. We never bid a job by the hour. We don't do it. But when I say that, we go into a building or buildings or complex or whatever it is, and we may take pictures and notes, and when we're done, we figure out how long will that job take us. Will it take us 4 hours? Will it take us 8 hours? Will it take us 16, 32? How many employees? And then you got to figure out the chemicals also, and we have a good system with the chemicals also. We have multiple vendors we use. But the financially, and this is very important, so your COGS, as we call them, the cost of goods sold. So that is like, what is it going to cost me to clean at this company? And you need to get your COGS, like how much my employee cost me, down to around 45% of the cost, because you have insurance, you have chemicals, you have marketing, you have so many other expenses. But if you can get your COGS to around 45%, and it won't always be perfect, you'll make money. You'll be happy in the long run. Now, it's not always true. We have bigger contracts, that are 5 figures a month, that the COGS is higher because of the scale. And so you have to figure that out. You don't want to, if you want to have a chance of getting that bid, your cost or your charge to them has to be a little bit lower because it's bigger companies with smaller margins. But you want to find your sweet spot, whatever your sweet spot is. And we have some very nice large contracts, but if you have a bunch of what we'll call middle-sized contracts, I believe your finances are much steadier, and you don't have like one company taking over 50% of your income, which is a major problem. And it's something we look at when we buy a company, is if one contract's the bulk of it, that contract's a high risk for us, and we have to take that into account. Where I have, let's say, 50 accounts at $4,000 a month, losing one hurts, but we can replace it with another one. But the important thing is to keep those COGS, and we find on the smaller contracts sometimes, which are more work, you get your COGS even down lower than 45. But if you can stay at an average of 45, create yourself a spreadsheet. We have that where it shows you, okay, this is how much the income is, this is how much the employee expense is, this is what our gross income before our rent and before we pay us, before anything. Keep it at 45%. It is beyond important. Keep track, know your bank account, know what's in there, know how much you're charging and how much. The finances is where we like to, look at them at least once a month and say, okay, here's what we need to do. We have to, it's not worth, this contract's the worst one. We have to raise their price because the COGS are so high. We can't do all that work for X amount. Those are decisions the owner should make, and move forward. And the financial systems, you have to keep them up.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at too is that the profit is the lifeblood of a business, right? And so you have to be profitable, and you have to be making, if you're making really good money, it allows you optionality as well to hire and bring in more systems, like hiring a real manager, like hiring virtual assistants, and putting more and more money towards marketing, and just frankly taking more money out of the business for yourself, taking a higher salary. All those things come down to knowing your numbers, making sure the COGS are in good places. This is especially important in the beginning as well when you're doing the cleaning, because I think a lot of times they're doing the cleaning, these really small businesses come in and they say, hey, I'll do this job for what it seems like pennies on the dollar, but since they're doing the cleaning, it seems like they're making a lot of money. But what they're doing is restricting themselves to never being able to hire somebody, because if they hired somebody, they would have to pay them as much as they're making, if not more than what they're making. And so it really bottlenecks somebody by their prices. And prices is in and of itself a conversation to where genuinely more often than not higher is better. You do not always want to be the lowest bidder. It's a bad place to be if you're bidding on price and not on quality. Sell quality, not price, and that way you can raise your COGS. Yeah. I do want to talk a little bit about marketing.
It's a little bit, let me add one thing to that, is that I'll put the numbers on it. You don't want to get all the bids, like Cameron just said. It's not worth it. There's going to be some small little company with no overhead, and they go in there and they create a job for themselves. They will burn out and that company will come back to you. So you want to, if we get 50% of the bids we do, that's a home run because we're charging enough where we know we can make profits. So you don't want to get every bid. I mean, obviously you want to get every bid, but if you're getting every bid, you're doing something wrong. That's how I feel. You have to put profit in there, and the bigger, more professional companies know that because they have to make money on their product. They know you have to make money. If they're that tight where they're not going to allow you to make money, it's just better to walk away. I'd rather have no company. Too often we fall in love with what we call the top line instead of the bottom line. And what I mean by that is, let's say we have a $20,000 a month contract. Well, we got the $20,000 a month contract and we're only making $1,000 on it. That's not worth it. It's just like, really? Why would I do that? My COGS is 90% or 80%. It's not worth it. Where if I have a $5,000 a month contract and my COGS are in order, so I'm only paying $2,400 a month for all my expenses. I have $2,600. That contract's worth 2.5, 3 times more than the $20,000 contract. The top line is an ego thing. The bottom line is a business thing and where you make money.
The breath. Something we also talk about with when it comes to bids and winning bids or not winning bids is that once you get to a place of I don't need this bid, I actually think that your sales increases. Bidding from a place of desperation is not a good place to be, and so once you surpass that point and it no longer becomes absolute necessary that you get that bid, we actually think your close rate increases.
Yes, because you are speaking the truth to people. You are going in there and you're like, okay, this is what we need, this is what we have to do, and if we're going to do this, this is what it's going to cost. And you know what? And you may not get every bid, but you're being honest with them up front instead of making it tight, pinching every penny. You're making it very obvious, and you have the confidence and knowledge. The main thing, I think, honestly, is the confidence, because you don't need that job. That job, we want that job. We want every job we go into, but we don't need that job. Once you reach that perspective in your sales, it's life-changing in any business. I don't care what you're doing. You are comfortable. I want to show you, make it a win-win. And when you start making it a win-win, better for everybody.
Yeah, and I want to talk about a little bit about marketing going into this, because we've talked about how you get the cleaners, we talked about a lot of the systems in regards to that, and the financials and everything, and how to increase your profit. And once you increase your profit, once you get to this point, how do we get more clients? What's truthfully, in our opinion, is the easier aspect of this business is getting clients. Retaining clients is the hard part, and that's where the cleaners come in. Okay, but how do we get more bids? And there's really, from our perspective, probably 4 main levers, and the biggest one is without a doubt going to be SEO. SEO in just terms of ranking on Google, and nowadays with AI. But really these two are pretty interconnected. If you rank fairly high on Google, you're also going to rank pretty high on AI, because what AI is doing is actually using these same services that Google's using and pulling that information back over into an AI answer. So there's actually relatively similar answers that are given on both sides. But the other thing is that's really, really important is SEO correlated, which is Google My Business page. And if you don't already have a Google My Business page, first of all, shame on you, get one. It's maybe the most important thing you'll ever do. And then once you do it, there's a lot of ways to actively increase your ranking. One is just make sure you have all the information on there, all the appropriate information, your hours, your phone calls, your website, some photos for sure. And then get reviews on top of that. Get reviews on top of that. The more reviews, the better. And sometimes on the commercial side, it's a little harder. In the house cleaning side, it's a lot easier to compound these reviews really fast. The commercial side, you have less clients, you have more of a relationship building, and we wait a while before we ask for a review until the actual relationship is built up, and then we get review. But then you also want to make sure, this is really important for Google My Business, is that you have cross listings. There's a ton of websites. The big ones you're going to know about are like Google has like a listings, obviously. There's Google My Business. Bing has listings, and there's other websites like Yelp, Facebook, Apple, and there's other big ones, a ton of small ones. that you can put your listing, the same information, and it needs to be the same as your Google My Business page. And if that information is the same as your Google My Business page, it crosses back in and cross-references and increase your authority, basically, your domain authority and your listing authority, because it makes you more and more real the more listings you have in the backside. And so we get a lot of organic calls from doing that kind of work, which is SEO and Google My Business work. But this is a long and arduous continuous game of increasing your SEO. It's not a one-stop shop. I just increased my SEO and then you step away. This is a week over week, month over month, slow progressive process of increasing your SEO in the Google My Business page. And then once you're at the top, you have to maintain it to continue to do what you're doing. It's a never-ending game, essentially. But the other aspects of how we get clients is outbound reach. And those are two levers, really. There's cold calls and there's cold emails. For cold emails, and cold calls, there's tons and tons of services that will help you find and auto-populate contact lead list. And you can do that individually. You can go to your location, the type of person you're trying to reach, like facility manager, owner, property manager, etc. And then certain business size, because certain smaller businesses aren't going to want cleaning. And then it'll give you a population of those people. It can give you phone numbers and emails. And then you can use those phone numbers to do cold calls and call these property managers and try and see if they're not satisfied with their current cleaning services and if they'd be open to doing another bid right now, or if they just need services in general. And then two, you can essentially do the same thing with cold emails. You do cold emails, you send out campaigns, and there's a ton of services as well that offer you the ability to send out a email campaign, essentially, and it'll have you send out, anywhere from 1 to 9 emails to somebody in a campaign. And really, like, about 5 is a sweet spot. And you send out 5 emails to somebody, and hopefully on email 3 or 4 or 5, they're like, okay, who's this guy? And then they'll finally respond and they want to do a walkthrough. And those are the three of the main levers that we use. We have SEO, cold calling, cold emailing. The other main lever is just maintaining your contracts and word of mouth. Word of mouth is huge for us, because if you're doing really good work, especially in a janitorial sense, it can be difficult to find good cleaning companies, to be honest. There's a lot of crappy cleaning companies out there that just take contracts and do not do a good job taking care of their clients. And so if you do take on contracts, you do take care of your clients, and you do good jobs, people talk, especially industry to industry, or they move jobs, they moved into new factories, whatever it is, they'd be like, these guys did good work. And that has been really successful for us. And, when I talk about systemizing this at a certain point, once you get to this level, doing the cold emails and the cold calls and helping with the SEO and stuff like this, is again where our virtual assistants come in to help us play. And we have the tools and the tech stack to allow them to be able to assist and help us.
Okay, so going back over that, as you can tell, it's a passion of Cam, and he's extremely good at this. The marketing is not an issue. We have that down pat. I just want to touch base on, where we started from. And Google My Business, it seems like a big deal. It's very simple. It's free. Because most people don't have the marketing budget when you start like we do. But Google My Business is 100% free, and it takes a little bit of time, but do your research, do backlinks, do all these little things. And I don't want to get too much into the technical side of it, but it's free, it's easy, and more importantly, it's life-changing. Once you have your business on Google My Business, it will show up. Depending on how big a city you're in, it could be, top 10, top 2, top 3. The goal is to be in the top 3 every single time, and you will get there if you do the right things with Google My Business.
In regards to actual Google My Business listing, you basically virtually do not matter until you're in the top 3. I'll be honest with you. Until you're in the top 3, you don't matter. You will get calls, but it's very few and far between. The saying I like is that, where's the best place to bury a dead body? And it's page 2 of Google. And if you're not in the top 3 in Google My Business, it's essentially the same thing.
Yes. And so the other thing we did is the cold emails, in my opinion, work second best. And we, at first, and we still do this, we send out cold emails. We would try to find a decision maker in a company, send the email out, once a week, once a month, maybe, every 2 weeks. People, what they do is they go back and they look at we need a new cleaning company. This one's terrible. And they literally go back and do a search cleaning on this person emailed me, and they call us. It feels like half of our jobs come that way. It's probably not quite that high, but it's a lot. And then the other thing is the cold emailing on jobs that you lost. We're doing a walkthrough tomorrow on a very big project that we bid on a year ago. We were not the lowest bid. They took the lowest bid. Guess what? Just like it always does, They called us early next week, and we're going to rebid the job because they're not happy with what they had. They said, you guys were the most professional, but you were more expensive. Well, now they're thinking, okay, maybe more expensive is the way to go. But it's all cold emails.
Yeah, and the irony of a place like that, too, to me, is that it's like, this is a very well-off establishment. Like, why were you going cheap in the beginning, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's whoever made that decision, maybe they made the wrong decision, I don't know. But, you know, the point is that sell quality, not price, and usually quality wins over price in the end.
In the long run. In the marketing, those things are virtually free to do. The cold emailing, the cold calling, and the Google My Business. The first thing to do, get your Google My Business page. There's a million YouTube videos. There's a million things telling you how to do it. And yes, it does work. Our phone rings all the time. Jobs, I mean, there's certain jobs we just say no. We try not to do that, but they're just not big enough for us anymore. So, you know, you don't want to say no job's too small, but some jobs are too small, to be honest. The phone rings, which is what you're trying to accomplish. If you can make the phone ring, you're over the hump with the marketing. But honestly, I think everyone says it's the hardest. I think it's one of the easier things. Would you agree with that?
I think in cleaning, it's one of the easier aspects of this business. It's because there's a lot of churn. Churn's an unfortunate reality of this business as well. There's gonna be new employees. They want new cleaners. Everyone thinks they can come in and bring a better team in. And sometimes all the work that you've done, it feels like, to make a place look better, gets erased because the entire staff of the place is new. And so now there's a new standard set, right?
Right.
So
and
there's
the churn.
It's just a reality of churn.
The churn, you want someone else to have the churn, not you. And we've done an exceptional job because we have good cleaners of not losing our commercial contracts. It doesn't happen, of course. Management change, ownership changes, things happen. It's life. But you want to be having that phone ringing so that when you lose a contract, you got 2 or 3 to replace it, and that way you are growing every single week, every single month, year over year. And that is what we found. You know, I look back and we, you know, probably say this at the beginning, when we tried to get our first commercial contract, we got our first commercial one. We're like, whoa, you know, and then we got a second one, and then a third, and then a fourth, and a fifth, and so on and so forth. And after a while, they come. I don't even remember the last time. It's been years since we went out and actually cold called. Something we could do if we were desperate, but we have other things to work on, our systems, and that's where you want to get to.
Well, we do have virtual assistants make those calls for us, though.
True. We have someone doing that. That is 100% correct. And if you need help, virtual assistants, you know, that is a step. We are very good at that. One of our companies is a virtual assistant company. We hire virtual assistants for other people. We can help you with that, but that isn't where you want to start. You want to do it at first, learn your systems, get your systems in place so that you can get them and take the workload off of you. And they are, I can't say enough about them, how amazing they are.
If you can find the right ones, they're amazing.
My wife was an educator, and I think, what are we doing wrong? Because I talk to people, and like we're talking full-blown accountants with an education, medical professionals working for us, and they're amazing. To say they're amazing isn't enough saying enough. It's mind-blowing what they can do at a price point. Every owner task when you go to buy, which is where we're at now, is a risk line. What does the owner do? Because if the owner, let's say they have a big contract. Again, I go back, that's one of the number one problems when you buy a company. We actually looked at a company where 99% of the business was one contract. You know, what is the risk there of losing? You pay this money and the contract's gone because you don't know who sits on that board, who makes that decision. They might be the brother of the owner, and you're probably not finding that out. So there's always a risk. What does the owner do? Is the owner well connected in the community? That's hard to become if you're coming from the outside and buying a company. So everything the owner does is a risk factor, in my opinion, lowers the price of the sale of your company. So again, going back, and I can't emphasize it enough, the less the owner does, the more valuable the company. And you want to get, you know, you can get into other things, but the EBITDA, you want to have 2 to 5 to 10 to 12. Some companies sell for over 10 times the profit margin. That's basically what EBITDA is in a nutshell. Is so if you're making $500,000 a year, the difference between selling a company for 2 times that at $1 million or 12 times, $6 million. And a lot of that factor is how much does the owner do? If the owner is not involved, it's worth a lot more multiples than it is if the owner's involved.
There's a lot of it's kind of the number to find the multiple can be a little bit tough, but like the risk factor, that lever that does affect it, that multiple a lot, is I think where you're going with that too, right? Because like the more the owner does, the riskier that business is to acquire.
Correct.
Because it's like, you know, something we will do is like we'll call current clients when we do our due diligence and say like, you know, why do you do business with this company? And if the reasoning is that I love Tom, he's the owner of the company. That's an issue because if we come in and acquire a company, or anybody for that matter, comes in and acquires that company, you might lose all those contracts just because the owner is this charismatic figure that controls all these contracts and everybody loves him, even if his business is not necessarily as solid as his personality is.
Yeah, and let's face it, if you're starting a company, you clearly are most people don't do it, are a little more aggressive than the average person, maybe a little more controlling. These are all strengths, but when you have to prepare and learn, you have to delegate. Hardest thing. It is so hard for people. I can't tell you how many people can't grow their companies because they will not delegate because they don't trust somebody else to do it as well as they do. Yeah, you know what? Maybe they won't do it perfect, but they're going to learn. They have to learn too. And you train these people and you do quality control inspections and get them to where, you're not the best cleaner anymore. You're like, wow, if I can get Susie or Joe to go in and do the cleaning, it's better than me because I'm working at the business and not in it. And so that allows me to grow. So you have to, going back to the hiring again, you have to get the right people on board and you have to trust them. You always want to check on a company, make sure things are good, but you have to have a level of trust. If you can't do that, quite frankly, you can't grow your company. It's as simple as that. Either you can or you can't. If you're one of the people who can't let go, I have to see every single picture, every single clean. You have to fix you before you can fix the company.
Yeah, I think every business is a people business. It's kind of what Ron said. And I like one of the quotes I like, or from the books I read. I'm not sure if he's the original person who made this quote, but Jim Collins' book, From Good to Great, talks about putting the right people on the bus. And I think if you have the right people on the bus, is like essentially what you're saying. Like, we have a great staff, we trust them, we can delegate these appropriately and respect and understand that task that we're delegating is going to get done and get done well. And that is a fundamental part of being able to step back, is actually trusting people to be able to do these things, which I think a lot of owners do struggle with, right? It's like micromanaging is a big deal. Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal and it's hard to give things up. But if you can give it up and someone can do it at the 90%, 70 to 90% level of you're doing it, then absolutely give it up. And I'll even take a step back that I think there's certain things like cleaning in particular where, we hire people that are better than us at cleaning. We used to think we were the best cleaners ever in the freaking world. But, then you hire some people who actually know how to clean. And you're like, oh, I actually am not that good compared to this person at cleaning. And, that's at the lowest level of a commercial cleaning business because, the next levels are higher level things. But again, like, when you are an owner, you wear a lot of hats. And what is wearing a lot of hats do? It kind of makes you a person of a lot of things and not great at any individual thing. And when you can hire somebody to handle certain things that they can handle, they're going to do it at a higher level than you are when it's one thing that you're doing all day versus their thing they have to do all day. When you have 10 things to do and they just have to handle that for you.
Yeah, letting things go is very hard. And I love some of the lines we have here. Rockefeller was considered one of the greatest businessmen. Don't have to agree with everything he did, but one of his favorite lines is, I would rather have 1% of 100 people than 100% of one, which is where you're going with your business. I would say I'd rather have 1 or 2% of 1,000 people than 100% of me or anybody else, because then when you lose somebody, it's not as big a deal. And the other thing they always say is, if you're early, I love this line, you're lucky. Well, you're not lucky, you're making your own luck. If you're late, it's still fixable. I love those lines.
Yeah, I'm kind of late on this one, but one of the things I do love about commercial cleaning is that, if you can maintain your contracts and stack them, it makes this business exceptionally scalable. A lot of businesses are one and done sales, especially if you're a product, even like one-time cleans or like one time, you're one done. But when you could stack contracts on top of each other, it makes it much easier to grow. If you can land just a few of these contracts, there's a couple contracts out there. And I tell my friends this sometimes in commercial cleaning. I'm like, you could land 1 or 2 commercial cleaning contracts and double your income. I mean, especially if you're doing the cleaning in the beginning, right?
100%.
And you could land one contract that's $10,000 a month, and you're doing the cleaning, and all of a sudden you're making $120,000 a year.
And if I had to start all over, that's exactly what I'd do. I'd go get 1 or 2 commercial contracts. I'm not going to houses. So I'm not cleaning a house.
Yeah, we've actually talked about that. If crap hits the fan, I'm like, we're not going to lose all our contracts. I would go. Yeah, we could probably make $250,000 each. Just clean it
in a heartbeat. And we're not working that much. It would be that easy.
Yes.
And that is the power. And I love the recurring income. It's when you get a business, it has to be cleaned. Absolutely has to. You have office complexes that need cleaned. They have people coming in and out of every day. And I don't think we touched on it. An office complex is great. So like we clean, normally you get hired by the owner, you do the what they call the commons area. You know, I'll think of one right now, the one we started in. It has 10 public bathrooms, literally public bathrooms. We clean all the bathrooms, we clean all the floors, the elevators, we do all of that. But what happened, because we did a good job, you know, there's offices in there, and every couple months we get a call, hey, we hear you do great work. So now we clean most of the offices. Not only do we go in and do the commons area, but now each individual office, which is a different company, we do those offices. And every complex that we clean that is like that, it's one more. Then you get into the property manager. The property manager for that property, she only recommends us because she likes going back to the quality. She likes the work we do. So when she gets a new contract, a new property, she says, hey, you need to go to this company. They do great work. I love them.
And it's something in the cleaning industry as well, is that I've mentioned as well, is that there's a lot of bad companies, to be honest. There's a lot of companies that just take these contracts and just do not fulfill the service that they offered. There's a lot of really big companies that say, hey, I'm going to do everything under the sun, and they just don't, you know. And that's where, you know, they can get outbid in that sense. But usually, you know, it comes full circle. These bad companies that bid these jobs at low prices and don't take care of their companies, these big companies that overbid and promise everything under the sun and don't fulfill because they're so out of touch with it. Everything comes back full circle to us, it feels like, you know. And as we scale, it has to become important to us as well that we don't become that company.
Right, you have managers in place that take care of the quality, etc.
All right, guys, I just want to say thank you for watching. Me and Ron are going to be doing a video like this every single week. If this is an interesting subject to you, or you own a cleaning company, we'd love it if you subscribed. Please leave any questions or comments you have below. We can break down many of these subjects into one video. I mean, I know I could talk about marketing for hours probably, and I know Ron could talk about many things for hours. But if you like this, please subscribe, and I just want to say thank you guys for watching.
Have a great day. Thanks.